could go out there, and if I could learn more from the people around me, then I would have an opportunity to advance my own interests.
Welcome to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. My name is David Gilliland. I'm one of your hosts. We are fortunate today to have Brett Snyder with KnucklePuck out of the DC area. Brett, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, Brett, you've got a digital media company that likes to stand out and show that it can be done differently and be done well. And you've got a dispersed team, all working virtual now since the change up in things that we all went through with the pandemic and such. Tell us just a little bit, though, how did you get started? What made you decide to jump into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think the simple answer for it is that I was a lousy employee. And what I mean by that is I was an arrogant employee. So I started KnucklePuck when I was 26. I had worked for a couple of years in an agency called Sear Interactive, which is now one of the biggest, most well-known kind of SEO and paid agencies. But I started there when I was the 8th employee. And so I got a lot of exposure to that early startup piece. I got a lot of exposure to the idea that what you're willing to learn and what you're willing to apply in my field will take you very far. There is not a corporate ladder that you have to follow. There isn't a partner track that follows a very formal and established process. I really liked SEO, which is my personal background, search engine optimization, because of that exact reason. I could go out there, and if I could learn more from the people around me, then I would have an opportunity to advance my own interests. And so at Sear, I learned everything that I could about how to do the job, how to do SEO, how to make sure that you're doing the research, organize things. Ended up moving to Atlanta when my wife got into law school down there. So, this was back in 2010. So remote was still like a far off kind of future thing. So I left Sear because there was no office down there. They were a Philly-based company. And then I worked at an agency where I got to learn a lot of the C-suite side of things, how to talk to C-suite, how to sell the service. And so throughout those two different experiences, I really kind of, what I remember more is a lot of the friction. A lot of the things that I wanted an opportunity to solve problems that I saw were very apparent and affecting our team. And fast forward years later, I've gained a lot of humility that, my priority problems, it's not that leadership at the time wasn't aware of them. They just weren't the problems that commanded their attention at the time. And as I started to go off on this path on my own, I learned very quickly that you don't get to do all the things that you want. You're not really your own boss, but you do have control. And that was one of the things that was really important to me when I, started the business, is that I wanted to have control over my circumstances. And I wanted to have what I felt would be a much more kind of tangible ability to impact what happens with me, but also what happens with my clients.
Very cool. And then, you jumped in, and within 2 years, you'd already passed your $1 million mark. So, you landed some good clients, you learned some sales and some things there that you could do and do well. And you've been growing ever since, and probably learned some great lessons. Can you share with us one or two nuggets? You're like, this has made a difference for my business since passing that $1 million mark.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a great question. I think it's really interesting for KnucklePuck in particular. We're a digital agency, so we're a professional services organization. And as a result of that, like, people don't scale. Like, when people say they want to scale their agency, like, scale implies being able to extract more value out of the same finite resources. And with people, that doesn't work like software. You can't run, multiple variations of programming through it. And so that was one of the things that I learned very, very quickly. Because as you mentioned, we hit the $1 million mark pretty early in KnucklePuck's lifespan. We turned 10 years in May of this year. And we hit it in about year 2 because I brought on some partners that brought in some capital injection, but they also brought in a lot of really high value relationships. And so all of a sudden we went from, maybe 20K in monthly recurring revenue to 150K in MRR in the span of a quarter. And so having to increase that very quickly, having to learn very quickly the hiring and the things that matter and the things that don't. And I think I had an ops person a couple of years ago who unfortunately didn't work out. And a lot of the reason why we struggled with one another is that he kept like, hey, look, things are falling through the cracks. Like, we're dropping things. We're not getting everything done. And I'd say, Scott, like, I get it. Like, it's not possible to get all the things done. We're carrying too many things right now. Some stuff is going to fall off. And some things, again, small things nobody cares about. The printer doesn't work. Like, that's less important than our invoices aren't going out, or we can't get a place to deposit our checks. And so I learned very, very quickly that you don't get everything that you want out of this environment. You have to be able to make choices. And those choices you don't usually see if you're right or not for probably 3 to 6 months at a leadership level, right? When you're getting down to the weeds, you have a little bit more cause and effect. But I have talked a lot with colleagues and with other folks, people I've mentored, students I've mentored, where leadership has to be living 6 to 9 months in the future and understand that you have to make decisions now that will impact that. And once we hit that 7-figure mark, that became very, very quickly apparent to me that we have to make decisions now, but we also don't know if they're going to be successful until we see how things play out.
How did you kind of break yourself from the weeds so that you could be thinking 6 months and a year out with your time?
Oh, I wish I could say that I did it through, a secret trick that I'd found. But honestly, I think a lot of it was, you get beat up a little bit. You make some of these decisions. You want things to go the way that you are. I remember we've only had to do layoffs twice, like true, like reduction in force layoffs twice in 10 years. And the first time was, it broke me because I kept thinking, like, there's got to be another way. We've got to be able to find a way to fix this. We've got to find a way to protect these jobs. When the reality of it was, we had too many people. We didn't have the billable work for them. We had specialized resources that we didn't, and we had generalized work. And so I think the big piece from it is understanding or having to learn that if you don't make a decision, inaction is a decision in and of itself. And I think that's one of the pieces where, when I learned that you can't just white knuckle your way through everything, up to that point, a lot of things, I won't say they came easy to me, but I've had that kind of entrepreneurial spirit and mindset for most of my life before I applied it to kind of my professional career. I like the grind. I actually really liked the hustle culture mindset of it. We'll totally admit that there's a lot of toxic elements to it, but I liked that idea of like, let me just kind of work this out. And as the company started to get bigger and we had more staff, we had more diversified service offerings. So when I started it, I was just doing SEO. We brought on a paid media department when I hired somebody who I trusted could build the department as well as I could do SEO. And then for about 4 years, we had a web dev department as well. And so adding these various different elements to it, one of the big things that I learned, is, again, like the idea that you can control everything doesn't exist, and the idea that you have to be able to take calculated risks. I did the same thing when I acquired my web dev shop. You do the same thing when you hire an individual person, take on a new project. And so I think that's the part where I can't say that I learned a trick that helped me deal with it. I kind of got to the sense that it's like, this is what I think is going to happen. I have to make my best effort to try to get us there. But then I also have to be realistic about whether it was successful. You don't get points for trying. You don't get a participation trophy in entrepreneurship, right? You either find a way to build your business in a way that can pay for itself, or the business will not be successful. And I think that's the part that I think I learned more than anything else is, that there's always the chance that it can be unsuccessful. And so you have to be on top of it. You have to be conscious of the things you're doing and being critical about whether or not it did what you wanted it to. Not if you wanted it to be successful, but can you measure it? Was it actually successful? Did you achieve what you wanted to? And can you stay disciplined to those metrics?
I I appreciate it. I'm just listening. Also, as a business owner, right, and going through and thinking through the things you're talking about, and and there's times I even get stuck to where I am looking so far into the future and planning that way, trying to make decisions that make sense further down there, and sometimes forget that I have to today ensure I don't run out of cash also. That there's this
Mm-hmm.
constant balance, right?
Yep.
Future decision, today don't run out of cash, because today running out of cash causes the future to never even come about, right? It just ends it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if I make all my decisions thinking just cash, cash, cash right now, I'm not building what I actually need for the future. And we'll get there in just as bad of a position as we are today. Or, you know, grown at the same level, not as accelerated as we had hoped. And so taking those risks, managing those, and just taking a moment to say, so how am I doing? Long term, short term? Are they coming together or not? Great insight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You had to drop a whole team, right? You had to do a
I did.
reduction force and get rid of an arm of your business. You said No action is action. But how did it feel? And when you had to make the decision, what helped you move forward on it? How did you use your team to get through that well?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So there were I had, like I mentioned, I had a web development business that I did a small aqua hire, a couple years ago. We had gone through the whole like restartup phase to get like everything rolling, and then 2020 just completely cut off like all of our RFP flows. This was several years ago, and so PPP, I that kept this business alive and that line of business alive. There was no way I would have been able to continue to pay that full time, very well compensated staff without some of that support for it. But for me, it's interesting. Like, I wish I could tell you that I came to this epiphany and I, made the decision proactively for it. But what really happened is the business was struggling already, and we weren't burning cash, but we were really having to push hard to try to keep our head just above water, just to meet our expenses. And I mentioned we had a full time U.S. domestic FTEs, that was an expensive team, and then eventually we had one of those where the leader of the team left very unexpectedly, to the point where like we were on a pitch for a six-figure website, and he says, "Hey Brett, can you hang at back after the call?" And then basically quit with 2 weeks notice, which is really really challenging in a leadership position. Anybody who's listening to this that is an aspiring leader, regardless of how bad things are, or whether you're burnt out or whatever the reason, like 2 weeks really forced my hand in a lot of ways that didn't give me a whole lot of options, because I had to call all these people that we were selling. I think I had about 600 grand in the pipeline, and I had to call these people and tell them I have to withdraw. And because we had large projects that were in motion, I couldn't even tell them why, because I needed to be able to continue to use whatever team and resources I had to finish some of the other ones. I couldn't be public with the fact that we were shutting all this down. I couldn't even tell the staff on this team that, the intention was to shut down, because I needed to get through these other websites so that I don't get sued for breach of contract and X, Y, and Z. And that was really tough. That was one where, and again, I think the takeaway for me on that was, once it happened and once Corey had left, I was just like, I don't have a whole lot of options, so it does me no benefit to delay on this. And so I got chewed out by some people, like real bad. I had some folks that understood, and I told them, it's like, look, I don't feel like I can deliver on this project. I had some people say, this is how you do business. This is how you treat people after we've spent the last 4 weeks going back and forth. And I had to tell them, it's like, look, like, do you want me to take a project I can't deliver? Like, I'm telling you now, before you give me any money, I cannot deliver on this project. And so that was really, really tough because of all the different dynamics in it, because of the forced timeline for it, because of the active projects that were in motion that we had to complete, and the fact that the team lost their leader. They didn't know what was going to happen with it, but I didn't know how I was going to pay them. And we couldn't sign these other projects. If I had had some leeway time, we could have taken these other projects. I could have found a new product owner or some sort of leader for the team. But I was not willing to put my reputation and my business on the line for some of these larger projects. And so I think the big piece for me was, a lot of it was talking to other people who have been through it. I had some folks, even ones that, you would say we didn't have a bad relationship, but there's something that forges in trauma and in hardship. And so even some of the folks that maybe we would kind of butted heads for, they're like, I get it. Like, I get where you're at with this one. Like, let me know if there's anything I can help. We found homes for all of our clients. I wrote letters of recommendation, did what we could for the team. But really, I think that the big advice for it here is, and most good leaders know this feeling, where if you know that the decision has to be made, you have to just do it. This is just, there's no secret trick to it. You have to just be willing to go up and pick up the phone and say, look, I can't take this project. Look, y'all, like, I have to shut down the team. I've got this much time I can continue to pay you, and I can write you your letters of recommendation. But, I'm not going to lie to you. I think the team, as soon as their leader left, the team told me, like, I just don't blindside us. Like, whatever happens, I just don't want to be blindsided like happened here. And then again, it's, nobody likes hearing that it's over. People were upset that, I was shutting down the team, but I told them, a month in advance. I did a stay bonus. So instead of a severance for it, I said, I will give you a bonus and pay you if you just work these next 3 weeks and hit these things that I need done on these projects. And if you get those done in a week, then we're done. I'll pay your bonus. If not, like, I need to use that money to hire a freelancer and to find something else. And so the biggest piece is, there's no way to prescribe the full solution for it. I think the big one is, if you know that, like, you gotta to jump, then, like, latch the chute on and jump. because the plane is, if you know the plane is going down, it's you got to find a way to get out of it as quickly as possible, even if you don't have a full plan in place.
Yeah. I mean, entrepreneurship is a full contact sport. It just is.
Hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being willing to share that. I think a lot of us have been through or are facing now some of those same decisions and issues. And you know you've got to do it, so do it, and do it in a way that's respectful of everyone engaged involved. You've got to act, be clear, engage them. I love that you gave them the notice. You had a stay bonus on there. You found places for everyone, right? You were like, it's not their fault that we're making this choice, but we have to make
Hmm.
this choice. Let's find a way to do it together. So great advice. Thanks so
Absolutely, not
much for
all
sharing.
their fault. Right? It was a great team, and I think that was the part for it where a big part is especially if you have professionals, right? If you're hiring full time professionals like I have across the board, you got to trust them with the reality of the situation. Right? And that's what I tried to do. I said, look, like I don't like this at all. I like every word I wrote in this letter of recommendation, I wholeheartedly believe, but I cannot sustain this business anymore. So I have to make a change to it. And again, whether or not everybody, agreed with it, I can't say. I do feel confident that people understood why I made the decision that I made, even if they didn't agree with it, even if they thought there was another way. I do feel like people understood, and I think that's a big part of leadership. And we learned this when we implemented EOS. Like the goal is not agreement, right? Leadership shouldn't have your goal to say you want agreement from the entire group. The idea is consensus, and or not consensus, but same pageness. You want people to understand what is happening, whether or not they agree or would have done it if they were in that seat. You need to be able to foster same pageness, and so that everybody understands that I am in a leadership position. I have decided this is the direction that we're going to go, and so we need to work together in that pursuit. And I think that was one of the things that I was pleased with how I handled that, because I didn't, I held back maybe some of my, personal challenges from some of this transition, but I told them the truth. I told them the truth about how, what was happening with it. I told them the truth about what the implication of this person leaving meant. And I told them the truth about why I cut the pipeline, why I said there was money here that could have paid for it, but I didn't feel like we could do it properly. And I did not feel as though that was something that was going to do justice to the clients that have trusted us with their work. And
Yeah.
so, that the idea of being honest is a difficult thing, but is a powerful thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can't build trust any other way in the team or in your customers. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit now. I mean, you've learned some things. You've been beat around and you've been successful. All right, you're still here and you're still doing great work for customers and you're keeping your promises and you're growing as a business. What are you working on now? What's your latest challenge that maybe we could give a little to help you in your journey as you are stretching to the 8-figure mark?
Yeah, I think the one of the big things that we have really spent a lot of time focusing on is this idea of a remote culture, because we are a human business. We are a consulting business. I could talk about AI and these tools being something that everybody's talking about. We've got to find a way to incorporate them. I don't think that's new. Uh, but I do think it's an interesting mindset of what you expect these tools to do. Do they empower the people you have? Do they replace the people you have? Do they complement the people that you have? I'm a big believer that all these tools they're still tools that need to be wielded by somebody, by a person with critical thinking skills. We're not there yet. I think we're 3 to 5 years at least before we have anybody besides the bleeding edge that has able to use some of these tools to replace a lot of the, at least the strategic work that we do from a consulting standpoint. uh, and so it really comes back to the idea, it's like we want to embrace these tools, but through the context of how they're going to be used by people. And I think that's where we start looking in terms of like remote culture, and how do we train people and keep a company vision on how we use these tools moving forward. And so that's definitely one of the things that we have struggled with. I'm personally very much an in office, or like an in-person leadership style. That's my natural state for it. And so when I could walk around and I could see people and ask them what they're working on, or see somebody struggling and help with, like, that may not be for everybody. It doesn't have to be the way every business runs, but that was my natural leadership style. And so shifting to a remote environment where you have to be more intentional about setting up meetings. There aren't the same organic kind of conversations. And so that's been one of the areas that, how do we how do we continue to encourage people to bring their best work? one of our core values is to create value, not to add value. That's table stakes. If you're not adding value, then you're not going to work here for very long. But the idea of creating value and finding things that we can do that make us more than the sum of our parts has been an area that we're still exploring. We're doing a
Yeah.
retreat in October. We do monthly team building events. We've done a book club. I think it's difficult not only to understand what to do, but how to measure whether or not that actually accomplishes what we want to. We've tried to measure employee sentiment. We're not super confident in the metrics. One, two people does or does not fill out the survey, all of a sudden things are swinging wildly. And so I think we're struggling with understanding. We have a lot of ideas, but we're struggling with prioritizing and then measuring the impact of these culture focused kind of initiatives.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, you've already embraced and you've talked about a little bit on this show a management system or process to ensure you have everyone on the same page, right? Let's get them same pageness. It may not be all in agreement, but at least everybody knows what we're working on. That's a that's a top down leadership or management style. And it's important to keep rhythm and to keep objectives clear for everyone what they're working on. But when it comes to leading people, some of the natural things you do when you're face to face start to get lost when you're at a distance. And some of the passing on of values and the why behind things, like what Brett really cares about and what the others really care about that inspire us to stretch, to do more, to create, as you're saying, right? That really pull us where we want to do a lot more than show up for our paycheck and deliver on our KPIs. We want to figure out new ways of doing things we haven't even thought of before and doing it better, right? Faster, cleaner, whatever it is. Tapping into that kind of discretionary effort in the heart of your team requires a little bit more of a leadership system or process. If you were able to solve this puzzle, how do I get measurable, impactful results from building the culture on this remote environment so that you can grow? What's that worth to your business? What's it holding you back right now? Or is it just a nice to have?
Oh, I mean, I think it's definitely got value. How to quantify it, I think, is the challenge. I love that phrase. I want to take a second to call back out the phrase you used with discretionary effort. I'd never heard that before, but I think that's a really, really great way to put it. We had talked about it kind of as productive hours in the past. We talked about your non-billable time. If you're not fully loaded up with billable time, what else are you doing to create value for the organization? And I think from what I have learned and what I have experienced is that most people, you can know nothing is absolute, but almost everybody wants to do a good job. And like people don't come to work and say like, yeah, I really hope I do a bad job today. I'm really just like I'm striving for bare minimum. Right? Like while some managers can get frustrated and that they say, hey, somebody's not giving their full effort, they're not doing this. I do believe that people come in to their work with the intention of doing a good job. I think what gets challenging with this is kind of balancing telling somebody what it looks like versus robbing them of their autonomy to do things the way that they want. Because when you take somebody's autonomy away, then you get resentment. Then you get this bare minimum. Then you have people who are going through and say, you told me to do this. I didn't really want to do it. Here you go. Here's your deliverable. Here's your report. Here's your list of ideas. Here's your content concepts, whatever. Whereas trying to encourage an environment or create an environment where people can say, hey, what do you all think we should be doing here? Like, what is it that you see as the main thing? I may not agree with it. I'm not going to say you don't get everything you want just because you raised your hand. But what do you think we should be spending this additional time on? Where do you think the holes are in our process? What do you think will improve our client retention, which was something we really focused on about 2 years ago? We were really struggling with client retention. I actually had to make a change on our leadership team to bring in a VP who could help steady that ship. And because we always had really great retention for years, and then it struggled for a while, and now this quarter was the first time we've done mid-year bonuses in since COVID because we have finally gotten our retention piece in place. Our new biz dev is churning, but it's the retention piece that really stuck. And so when I think about this and I think about what it is we're trying to do to encourage people to bring their skills and to apply them in that discretionary effort, we got to find a way to make it exciting for them. People don't put in discretionary effort to things they're told to do. They put it into things that they are passionate about
That's right.
individually. And so I think that's one of the areas that we could certainly do a better job with this. I like in this kind of live coaching
Yeah,
discussion piece
let's play with
is,
this a little bit then, because it's a different approach. There's some things that are the same. So I'm going to go back to same pageness, which is fine, except for people who didn't have input on what should go on that page. They feel like you just told them. They feel like you took their
mhm,
agency right away from them. Autonomy is gone. He told me exactly what I need to do to keep my job. That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm allowed to do is actually a message they receive. Or it's all they're willing to do now because you didn't trust them. Now, it's not that we didn't, but our messaging didn't. And often just the structure of what we're doing didn't. And so here's an interesting thing. I was working with a guy. This was not professional services. This was one of these home services type, an electrician. And he was just ranting and raving about all his team members who just didn't get it, who seemed to have zero motivation at all. They only clocked in and clocked out and did the bare minimum to not get fired. That's how he felt about his crew. And it was a Friday afternoon while he was telling me this, and the crew pulls up. And one of the crew members, who he was particularly upset about, jumps out, and he was the most animated individual I'd ever met. He was so passionate about what he had planned for that weekend. I mean, he had a big group coming together. They had dirt bikes, they were going out, they had the coolers, they had the drinks. I mean, it was the guy was running it. He had people coming. I mean, he even had a mechanic who was coming in who was going to be able to care for. I mean, he was so excited about it. And I was like, this is the person you said innately has no motivation. That's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing
mhm,
someone who's highly motivated, driven, loves to organize, gather, create incredible things. But at work, you haven't tapped into any of it.
mhm,
I've never met someone who has no motivation outside of clinically depressed at the time. Okay, so I have met a few, but very few. Everyone else has motivation, but they're living a life that has sucked it out of them. And they're in a role that has completely capped them down. And so then we start saying, well, how do I open this up? And this is where a leadership system comes in play that lays over the top of and complements your management system of an EOS that you already have going. Okay, so you start thinking, so wait, what is this leadership system? How does it work? Well, first, a core element is let's begin with your team co-creating the vision. I don't need a VTO handed to them. I need first something above the VTO that they're co-creating, that they're saying, what is our purpose? What's my why, my meaning beyond customer satisfaction? That's a customer value proposition. I don't want to hear about fastest, cheapest. I want to hear about the impact that your team wants to have. Now, that impact can be all over the place, and different team members have different things that drive them. For this electrician guy, he was driven by community and cool things, right? He just wanted community. Otherwise, he'd have gone off drinking and writing by himself. He created community. Community mattered to him for some reason. Your team, depending on how remote and how far, I mean, it may be a certain type of client they like to serve because they love to have impact in a certain space. But they love freeing up, freeing up women to live a full life. And so you tend to do clients that take care of products for health and wellness and lifestyle, whatever else. And I don't know. It may be that they love to create opportunity for the communities they live in. And so it's actually about, how do we, and now you've got remote workers in all sorts of places in the world that are third world type of things. And here they've got great work that now they can help others and train them who can get new jobs in with you. And they're building communities everywhere they go. I have no idea what impact your team cares about, what their why is. And it takes a little time to pull it out of them. But when you pull it out of them and then you say, we're really going to serve this above all else, that's something. That's something pretty
mhm.
powerful. Now,
I agree, and I think it's interesting to see where it comes in various quantities, right? Like it's a scale in terms of how much people are going to care about these things. And that was one of the other things that I learned early on is you can't expect everybody to be passionately motivated about the same things. That's not realistic, or at the same level or degree. There are some people that say, "Look, I just want to be able to come and do my job and go home." Like that's okay. I don't, that's something that we shouldn't villainize people who don't want to climb and push for more. Maybe people don't want the bigger title. Maybe they don't want the bigger responsibilities. Maybe they're comfortable doing the good work that they can. But to your point, it's figuring out what that is with the team that you have. And with EOS, we talk a lot about this right person, right seat, where you could have a really, really qualified person, but if they're not in the right role, it doesn't matter their intelligence level. It doesn't matter their network or their experience in the space. If you put somebody in a role that is not the right role for them, you are not going to get their maximum
yeah.
output. And so that was a really important exercise there to try to figure out, is this right person, wrong seat? Is this wrong person, right seat? Or so it's defining what the business needs and then being able to put that forward to everybody, say, this is what we're expecting. Somebody in this role, this is our vision for what this role needs to do for the company. If this is something that you think that you could do, let's explore that role for you. If you don't think that you're going to be somebody who's going to want to go and push there and to try to learn these new AI tools and to figure out some of these questions, and when new things come out with Google's algorithm or any new technology, like if you're not personally motivated to do that, then you can't be successful in that particular role. And so you either find a role you can be or you change the role.
Well, and I'm going to push a little further. You're trying to create a culture. You can't create. The culture comes from the inputs. And so it's not good enough to have someone who just wants to do their job and go home. That's exactly what puts brakes on your business and slows you down. If you want to get to 8 figures from a 7 figure business, you need to get people who are passionate. And every seat that has anyone who's not passionate in it is a set of brakes on your business. And not just passionate for the role. I do want them passionate about their role at the time, but I'm expecting them to leave that role and do other things in time with us. I need them passionate about the vision of the company. So much so that they forget their professionalism when they're talking about it. They get excited about it. When they're at their family parties and get together, they're talking about the cool things they get to do at work and the impact they're having. Why? Because it matters to them. They're finding meaning. It fuels them. It makes them a better spouse or neighborhood or community leader or whatever else because they're fueled at work. And uh, this has a massive impact. And if you're going to run a remote team and you can't touch everyone and kind of, well, they don't really care about this meaning here, and they're kind of a clock in, clock out, but they have a loyalty to me because we have these touch points and we've kind of built this friendship. If you want to build a remote team who's passionate about your culture, then you get measurable results and they're tapping to that discretionary effort where when they're in the shower, they're solving problems for your customers. If you want that, we can't hire a single person who isn't fully aligned with your purpose, your core values, and is excited about delivering on the mission, what we're going to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years, very measurable, and they know what they're working. Now we start to get into right role type of thing. But that top level piece, the clarity behind that really matters. And then when you're hiring just people who fit that, now your messages on the daily of, oh, check this out, look at the impact we had. So for elite entrepreneurs, we realize potential. We help people realize potential, come to awareness of their own potential or their business potential and make it real, a reality, right? So double meaning on there. We love to realize potential. Well, I get a little thing, a kudo from a customer. I'm sending it out to the team. Wow, team, one more realized potential. You're making a difference every day. Thank you for your efforts. Or calling out, hey, well done, Miranda or John or Cassie or Callie or, or whoever, right? Joelle, you did a fantastic job. I'm calling out my team who helped to realize potential. And they're going back and saying, yeah, what I do is meaningful. And it was just that fast. But the entire vision of what we care about is coming forward, and they're remembering we sacrificed to serve that. There's power in that. And now you can start to manage people remotely because they're tied together with a common theme. They believe in the same cause. And they don't have to just have who we rub shoulders with. Because we believe in it, now we have a common language. We talk that way. We're interacting around that. We're getting creative to solve problems around that. We're building solutions to go and serve that. And that takes it the next step as you start looking at how do I manage a team remotely and create cultural change or the culture that I want. First is what's the groundwork and is it solid enough? And did we co create it with the team that I want to keep? So I did say that I want to keep. It could be you have some team members that aren't in that core group that you want to keep. I don't need their ideas in it. I need the ones that matter most to me that I want forever. That's who's going to co-create this. So a first step.
And then it has to be able to extend from there because people will leave.
That's
Even your
right.
best
Absolutely.
employees will eventually likely find a new opportunity for them. They may have capped out on what it is that you can do here, and so how do you keep that after those co-creators maybe aren't there? How do we continue to co-create over time? Which is why this is such an interesting challenge because it's like the ocean, right? Like the tides come in and out. Like you still see
Change is
the
there.
body of water, but it's different all the time. It's constantly kind of in motion, which is where I think it's a good theory. I'm not sure if it's practical to say you must have everybody be 100% in on that. Like I think that's the ideal. It's what you strive for. I think the one piece that's like because I've tried that, and then like, do you get into like, do you just fire people for missing culture? Do you overload other people? Where do you make your compromises? And so I think a big part of it, I like the idea of that kind of co-creator and that idea that you can't just co-create it and then just let it run.
No,
The one thing
no.
that I
You've got
see
to set
EOS
up
is.
the hiring to make sure nobody gets in that doesn't now align with that one. We make it
Mhm,
really clear, almost like, I mean, you guys are fantastic at digital marketing, drawing in the right customers for your clients. Let's draw in, let's do great marketing to draw in the right employees for our team. What's
mhm,
that match look like? Let's ensure that's there. And then do we teach and train every one of our leaders to hire, lead, and fire to that vision on the daily? What's it
mhm,
look like? There's a pattern, there's a rhythm. All of the EOS rhythms you're using now, just overlay it with clear leadership messaging and getting the team to speak about it, getting the team to share the stories, getting the team to celebrate to where it becomes
mhm,
the de facto way of interacting.
mhm.
Anyway, there there's some exciting things. What happens when that really clicks is that you start to run to keep up with your team because they start moving so fast together the same direction. And
Mhm.
that's what we're after. And you can do that remotely just as easily as in person. Uh, but there are some changes. We could have
I would
talked
even
about
argue you
some
could
other
probably do
directions.
it. Yeah, you do it almost easier because a remote environment is inherently kind of fragmented out into individual efforts,
That's right.
right? Sometimes you almost can go against some of the groupthink that can happen in an office, or especially like I used to see this in our office. Like I've got a compelling personality. I've done public speaking for a long time. People can agree with my bad idea because it came from me. And I think that's one of the other things that we want to look at. It's like, let's evaluate the idea. Let's see if we can co-create the idea behind it. So it's not just, oh, well, Brett's the CEO. He must know what he's talking about. He must know more than me. And it's like, I know a lot. I have things to contribute here, but I don't deserve, a blank check. I don't deserve blind obedience to my vision for it. It should be challenged. It should be something that I can defend my position on some of those pieces or be willing to compromise on my vision for it with those co-creators.
And I think that's some of those keys of co-creating is to let people know there is time and space. Not when we're executing on it. There's time and space when we're mapping it out. When we're creating the page, that we're getting everyone on the same page, we've got time and space. Let's beat that thing up. Then when we're executing, let's go execute. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's decided, everyone's committed. Now we're moving forward, so that there's no confusion on that. But great. I like. There's so many different things we could be jumping into now, and I just think a great topic you brought up, and I really appreciate it, Brett, and for being real with us through this process. How would people get in touch with you if they want to access some of your great digital marketing skills from your team?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. Everybody is. Our website is knucklepuckmedia.com. I wish I could get knucklepuck.com. There's a punk band in Chicago that I still need to sell me that domain. But you can find us on knucklepuckmedia.com and you can reach out to me personally. My email is brett at knucklepuckmedia.com. Brett with two T's.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast, where we explored the ins and outs of the seven figure journey. If you found anything useful or valuable, please like, share, do what's necessary to get it to other seven figure business owners so they too can benefit from some of these insights. Keep striving, keep growing, keep learning, and caring about your team. Until next time.